Thank you very much, Brent, and welcome everybody. I'm really happy that you were able to join us here today. Um, as Brent mentioned, this is Aloft Sessions. This is a quarterly event that brand strategy and marketing communications firm Aloft does. Today's topic is on something that I think should be probably near and dear to everybody's heart, whether it's something that you actively participate in, but I'm sure it's something that just based on its intuitive value you know is important, and that is at the core of brand loyalty and what that means. Recently I got into a conversation about this idea of brand loyalty, and it was really interesting and kind of eye-opening to me listening to somebody else's view on this. I'm a brand strategy person, but I was speaking to somebody who is a marketing person, but not necessarily somebody who lives and breathes brand strategy. And their viewpoint on brand loyalty was interesting in that they felt that it was almost kind of a quaint notion, and that the idea of brand loyalty really didn't exist anymore. And the rationale behind this was equally interesting in that they felt that brand loyalty was something that probably existed at some point in the past, and now that the fact that most customers are completely in the driver's seat of the customer experience, they own the buying and selling process, that it's really just not possible to create brand loyalty anymore. So, while on the one hand, I agree that the customers are in charge here. We know that for sure. That customers, for a while now, have been in charge of the experience. They control the shots. The idea of sellers controlling the shots, of course, are long gone. It's the buyers now who in general, almost always control the shots. So while I definitely agree with that, I actually think it's for that exact same reason that brand loyalty and the idea of brand loyalty and the whole construct of brand loyalty is stronger than ever. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is what is this thing called brand loyalty? Does it really truly exist anymore? And if it does, then I think you probably know where I'm coming from on this is that yes, firmly we believe it exists very strongly. Then how do you go about creating it as a marketing person, as a company, as an executive? How does one go about creating brand loyalty? So let's start off a little bit just by some of the foundational things here in terms of when you think of the word loyalty and you think of the word brand, what does loyalty really mean in the context? If you look up loyalty, the word loyalty, basically loyalty means a faithfulness to commitments or vows, allegiance to something, an obligation to something. I mean, it's something that I think we all intuitively understand the idea of loyalty, both in probably our professional lives, certainly in our personal lives and whatnot. But if you look at the definition, and it has multiple definitions in the official Webster's version of this, but the word that is always consistent throughout all of this is this idea of faithfulness. So that means, essentially, at the core of loyalty is the core of brand loyalty is this idea of faith in a brand. And said differently, you could also think that of when somebody has brand loyalty, that means that they're choosing a brand over price and convenience. And I think that's a really important thing to understand because if loyalty didn't exist, the driving motivation for most of our brand decisions, whether they're in your personal life or your professional life, would certainly be over, price would be the bottom line. Everything would be I'm going to buy the most inexpensive thing I can that delivers what I need it to do. And two, convenience. I'm buying because it's easier for me to do that. But we know we don't do that, right? In our personal lives, we don't make decisions that way. These things play into it, of course. They impact our decision making, and there are some products and services that probably do fit that. In our professional life, it most definitely does not come into play because we choose all kinds of brands that don't necessarily deliver just 100% on price and convenience. So if you think about that gap there, that really is the core of what brand loyalty is all about. So one thing that is interesting to me in this process is, and as we go along through here, you'll find that when people go through their planning at a corporate level, when they think about their strategic objectives and their strategic planning over the course of a year, they always have these similar objectives of, of course they want to increase revenue. Check. Yeah, I've got that. We are going to increase our revenue by X% this year. We're going to increase our margin too. Hey, our margin last year we dropped our margin by 2 points last year. We need to get that up back to 3 points this year. So check. We are going to we're going to develop a strategy that helps us increase our margin. Third, market share, very common one, of course. Check, ditto. Again, this year we are going to increase market share. But interestingly enough, and I don't know if in all the years I've been doing this in my life, in my career, I've never seen the idea of increased brand loyalty in terms of an actual measure or a corporate objective. I certainly have seen it on the idea of a marketing plan, but I've never seen it at the idea of the corporate level. It's just something, you put, I want to increase brand loyalty, it's just crickets. There is just nothing out there that in terms of people wanting to make that a key objective of the organization. And I think that's a real shame, because as we go along here, I think you're going to see more and more on why I believe, and why everybody here at Aloft believes, that brand loyalty is something that needs to be at the core of all the work that is done, not just at the marketing level, but at the corporate level as well. So before I get too much deeper into what brand loyalty is, one thing I want to kind of clear up is this idea of brand loyalty versus customer retention. And I think those two ideas are often confused. So, what's the difference between just keeping a customer and is that the same thing as brand loyalty? Well, customer retention is not. Customer retention just means hanging on to a customer. That just means that you have kept this customer, they haven't left you, they've stayed around with you. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually loyal to you. There could be all kinds of reasons why they're hanging around, but they're not. They may not necessarily be loyal. On the other hand, brand loyalty goes just a whole lot deeper than this. Brand loyalty is something that goes in very deep. Brand loyalty touches into an emotional component of the relationship. Brand retention may be purely about financial reasons or convenience or all kinds of things. Brand loyalty goes in deeper, where emotions get into play. And that's where it gets really interesting in understanding how this works. And it also makes it very tricky to understand how to navigate that. So let's kind of look at some of the math behind why brand loyalty is important. Now, I know probably everybody on this at some point has heard a statistic about this. And if you go and you research this online, you'll find all kinds of things. This is in terms of what it costs to keep a customer versus what it costs to get a new one. So this is a statistic directly from Gartner, and I really very much like this. It's a 65%, on average, of course, 65% of a company's business comes from existing customers. Yet it costs 5 times as much to attract a new customer. And I think you probably have seen this statistic before, but you don't have to do the math, think about the math too hard to consider what this means. If over half of your business comes from the existing customer base you have, and it costs you 5 times as many dollars to attract each new customer, you can see what an impact this can have on a budget. So what if about 65% of your customers' business, what if you could increase that number? What if that number became 75 or 80% of the company's business comes from existing customers, meaning that you're still growing, you're still hitting your targets of 15% growth on an annualized basis, but a lot of it's just coming from the existing customer base you have because they're buying more and more from you and in a very consistent way. Your marketing dollars go down, your overall budget for maintaining customer retention, for customer service, they all start coming down. And as a result of that, the impact on a company's profit can be substantial. So there's a very, very easy financial argument in terms of why brand loyalty should be a key component. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind brand loyalty. So I think oftentimes when companies think about brand loyalty, they think about loyalty cards. They think about it in your personal life. I'm sure most of you have in your wallet, on your keychain, or somewhere, you've got one of those loyalty cards from CVS or from Walgreens or Best Buy or from your local supermarket or wherever the case may be. For many companies, that's what loyalty means to them. They have tied it into this program, which means that they want you to repeat buy from them, and they are incenting you by doing that for the card. But the reality of it is that really truly creating brand loyalty, or is it creating something else? So to better understand that, let's break this down in terms of what the science is behind brand loyalty. So let's start off at the most basics here. So customer satisfaction. Now, you would think if you have a satisfied customer, then theoretically that should lead to brand loyalty. But the reality is that it's not. I mean, the only thing that customer satisfaction is in reality is that these are two very different measures, and that brand loyalty transcends satisfaction, and it motivates customers to want, or at least be open to, buying your product over and over and over again. On the other hand, customer satisfaction just means that they're not dissatisfied with you. That means that they're content with what they're buying from you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to transcend to that next level to brand loyalty. And brand loyalty, when somebody becomes brand loyal, that means that they have, as I mentioned before, this emotional connection, but they also have this ability to be an evangelist for your brand. They want to go out and talk about your brand. They want to defend your brand if somebody says something poorly about it. They'll be the first one to jump on and support the organization. They'll be one of the first ones who buy a new product from you, introduce it because they're loyal to your brand. That's not the same thing as customer satisfaction. So I just want to remove that from the table, that customer satisfaction is obviously and clearly a key component to get to brand loyalty, but they're not one and the same. So customer satisfaction, it just means constantly delivering on what your product or service is supposed to do. That's a key component of this, is that's just delivering that baseline level of, hey, they bought our product to do this, and we just keep delivering on it, so we're keeping them satisfied. Now, I'm going to throw out some terms here as we go along here, and this is kind of one of the first key ones. Those are called functional benefits. If you want to be a brand geek in this stuff, that's a first key term here. Is when these things that your product, that your brand does, that just deliver what it's supposed to do, those are just the functional benefits. So I'm going to talk about two basic principles today, and this is the first one up. The first basic principle is that brand loyalty is not driven by delivering the functional benefits of your product. So in other words, doing what your product says it's going to do, doing that consistently, fantastic, you have to do that. But that is not going to be the main driver for brand loyalty. So what's really behind brand loyalty is this idea of customer commitment. So customer commitment is basically this idea that people are taking a further step into your world. And before you can even get to brand loyalty, you have to have the precursor to this is these two different levels of customer commitment. Now, customer commitment comes in two forms. One, economic commitment, and two, effective commitment. So let's break down the first one here. So economic commitment. So you need those loyalty cards I mentioned before. Here's a few on here: Best Buy and CVS. Staples. You guys probably have many of these in your own wallet. I know I do. This is the idea of an economic commitment. So an economic commitment is driven by dollars. That means that you are being loyal to a customer, or you're maybe not necessarily being loyal. You keep going back to a customer because they've got you in an economic condition with them. You could argue that this is certainly the case of, say, the cell phone companies that we belong to. I'm an AT&T customer. Do I feel brand loyal to AT&T? Absolutely not. And there's probably a whole host of reasons why that may be the case. But do I have an economic commitment to AT&T? I do. And the reason is that it's freaking hard to change your cell phone service. And so I feel obligated to stay with AT&T because it's hard to change. And and what I'm paying, I think, is pretty much the same as I would pay with Verizon or other ones. So I don't feel loyal to them, but I have this economic commitment to them. Now, the problem with the idea with these loyalty cards that are just driven on price is that economic commitment is false loyalty. It doesn't mean that your customers are loyal to you because they love you, because they have emotional connection to you. It just means you're paying them to be loyal to you. Now, On the one hand, there's a beautiful message in just in this one thing, is that loyalty is not necessarily driven by price and cost. It plays into it, of course, because everybody likes to know that they are getting value, but it's not the key driver. It's not the key driver behind these programs. So, in the case of all these companies that are doing loyalty cards and whatnot, they are basically creating false loyalty unless they turn this into a next level program, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this. And based on my experience with these loyalty cards, they don't do this. This is purely about getting a discount when you come into CVS over the weekend for 15% off your total order, which I do, by the way. The next level, I mentioned that there were two components on this. The second level of this is called effective commitment. Now, effective commitment is the gold mine of where brand strategy comes into place. Because effective commitment, at the core of effective commitment, is this idea of a very strong emotional connection. That's the key to loyalty, as I've said over and over again, is this idea of emotions, and that's really what is driving this. Customers with effective commitment stick with certain brands because they're just emotionally connected to them. They seek out, they choose these brands, and that's a key piece here, is that they are choosing these brands over and time again, over and over again. They have options, but they keep choosing you, and they may choose this brand. It may not even be. They may go out of their way to choose this brand. They may pay more money to choose this brand. But the idea is that they are choosing it over and over again. And because of this effective commitment, because this emotional commitment that sometimes they're not even really aware of that they have, that's what's really keeping them loyal. So what's interesting about this is that what gives people an emotional connection to a brand is that, one, the functional benefits are there, as we mentioned. So they're buying a brand, they're getting their functional benefits. In other words, the product's doing what it says it's going to do. Good for you, yay! You've got that baseline in there. But above that are these emotional responses. So emotional responses come from over and above experiences that somebody has with the brand. And by over and above, I mean over and above what the functional benefits are. So it's doing its baseline, great. But what else is going on here? Is there an experience that is going over and above their expectations that is creating this emotional connection? This is the turning point, and this is such a linchpin for understanding brand loyalty. Because when you use a product or service that just does what it's supposed to do, then you just kind of don't remember it because it's doing what it's supposed to do, so it just comes and goes. What we're really talking about with this effective commitment and brand loyalty is actually, believe it or not, just memory. Because what happens in our minds when we have an experience with a brand that went over and above what our expectation was, we record that in our memory. I mean, all things get recorded in our memory, of course. Everything just comes and goes. But memory is actually the idea of recall. So when we think of, when we're recording something in our memory, all memory means is how quickly can we recall it. Most of our memories are back in our brain someplace, but some things we can just recall easier than others. And the reason why we can do that is because something exceptional happened, and that's what allows us to pull it out. So in other words, when you have an exceptional brand experience, something that went over and above what you expected, you're probably going to remember it. You may not remember forever, but you'll be surprised at how quickly you can pull that from your memory. But if you're working with a brand, or your brand is just delivering the basics, unfortunately, people just forget about it because it did what it said it was going to do, which of course is great. Don't get me wrong, but it just kind of went in one ear and out the other, and you've moved on, and you didn't take time to have that to register. So this is the most basic component of what brand loyalty is really about. So basic principle number 2, I said there were 2 basic principles, and this is the second one, is brand loyalty is created from effective commitment. That's a really, really key thing here, is that brand loyalty is created from doing something that is emotional and is going over and above what the baseline expectations are. So let's break this down. So let's talk about the steps for creating brand loyalty. And I've got this narrowed down to 3 basic steps here. And I'm going to talk through some examples, and then at the end of this, please submit your questions as we go along as well, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this and whatever questions you have, or how you'd like to perhaps apply this at your own company. But let's break this down into the first step here. Okay. Brand loyalty step number 1. Focus on communicating functional benefits less and more on creating exceptional customer experiences. So what that means is, I think we all have worked with companies, with brands, where the functional benefits are delivering, the benefits that what our product delivers on a daily basis. It's talking about the basics. It's talking about features. It's talking about features, but it's also talking about, it's not just the features thing, but it also is the features benefits thing. So it's, that's all good. We need to talk about features and benefits. But one thing that I found time and time again that companies don't necessarily do is focus on how can we also create an exceptional customer experience. Now, there are some industries, of course, that have long ago figured this out, and you would expect them to. The hospitality industry, hotels, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, all those places, they long ago figured out this idea of exceptional customer experiences. But you know what? They're in the hospitality industry. They better figure out what the customer experiences are, because that's expected. You are buying a customer experience every time you stay at a Four Seasons. Even every time you stay at a Holiday Inn, you're buying a customer experience. Where it gets lost is on all the other industries in the world, which is pretty much everybody else who's not in the hospitality, or necessarily not in retail, or not in food and beverage. It's everybody else, the B2B companies, that don't tend to focus on how can we create an exceptional customer experience. And that's a real shame, because that's exactly where kind of the secret sauce and where the gold mine for this brand is. Now, one thing that I don't want you to be thinking that this has to be expensive. And in a minute, I'm going to be talking about what I believe a company should be dedicating to their budget for brand loyalty. But it really doesn't have to be something that expensive. In fact, it's something that could be free. And this is a really good example of what that might be. This is a auto repair shop called Jimmy Z. It's in Ohio. This is a guy. You can see this play. This is an actual note that a customer got. The customer's name is Zander, and the owner of this writes him a personal note that says, thank Zander, thank you for giving us a chance to work on your car. I truly appreciate your business, and I hope you were satisfied with the level of service we provided. Please don't hesitate to call on us again. Sincerely, Jim. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never gotten a card like this from any place I've ever had my car worked on. In fact, I don't think I've ever gotten a card or note like this from any service I've ever been for anything. Now, again, this is a retail operation, but I think this is something that we can apply to everything. What's beautiful is what happened after Zander. After Zander got this message, guess what Zander did? He is so floored by the fact that he got this note. He'd never gotten like I just said, I'd never gotten. I'm guessing you probably haven't got anything like this. He was so floored that he got this. What does he do? He takes this picture, the picture that you're looking at here, and he plasts it all over the internet. He puts it on Twitter. He puts it on Facebook. He puts it on Instagram. And he starts talking about, wow, can you believe this? I don't know what to say. I've just got this wonderful note from my mechanic. I mean, who gets notes like this? Well, we know what happens online when you do things like this. People start commenting. All of a sudden, people started commenting like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. This is fantastic. I'm going to call these guys too, blah, blah, blah. Or I wish, people from all over the country, all over the place are commenting. And they're saying, man, I'd give anything if there was a repair shop in my neighborhood that would act and behave like this. So this is an example of creating an exceptional customer experience that Jim here, didn't spend a dime on. This didn't cost him a dime to do this. Oh, okay, it cost him a stamp, right? But what it did cost him was effort and time. And that's a key thing about this, is that when you want to conscientiously create brand loyalty, it takes effort and it takes time. Sometimes it takes money, oftentimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. I can guarantee you that Zonder here is probably never ever going to go to another auto mechanic. He's probably telling he went online and told everybody, but I guarantee you he's telling everybody in his family, he's telling his neighbors, he's telling everybody he knows. Anytime this comes up, he's going to recommend. He has become an evangelist for this auto repair shop. This is such a good basic example of what brand loyalty is all about and how brand loyalty can create evangelists. Step number 2. First one is about a mindset and getting your mind in that place. The second one is you have to define what an over and above customer experience is to your target audience. Now that's different in every single case. So what might be an over and above experience for the auto dealership or the auto repair place that we just saw would be one thing. But if you sell software, if you're in the medical industry, if you're in the healthcare industry, if you sell medical device or whatever the case may be, what exactly does an over and above customer experience mean to you? Or mean not necessarily to you, more importantly to your audience. So here's an example of one that Aloft had the fortune of working with. And this is with the brand that I'm sure most everybody on here knows is the North Face. So we started working with the North Face. The one thing that the North Face has is that they have fantastic products. I'm sure most everybody on this listing owns some piece of North Face something, and it's probably something you're very fond of or you have owned it once in your life. Highly technical gear. Really, they do what they say they're going to do. They last a very long time. They're exceptionally well made. Just really, really good, solid products. So one thing that was interesting about the North Face, though, was even though they had millions and millions of customers around the world, they didn't feel that they necessarily have a relationship with them. And more importantly, the North Face was concerned that they had kind of turned into a fashion brand. And a fashion brand means that, well, people's choices come and go with fashions. And it's hard to be brand loyal in the fashion world just by the very nature of what fashion is about. Because fashion is about trends and changing. So the idea of fashion almost fights against the idea of brand loyalty in the first place. So the smart folks at the North Face recognized this, that they knew that they needed to, to continue and sustain the enormous amount of growth that they've had over the years. They knew they had to do something to push this even further, to really dive into that effective commitment. So one thing at the base of the North Face was that, you think about that image that I just showed before, where you have, people outdoors in these beautiful settings, and they're pushing the North Face gear to its hilt. But the reality of it is that there's a whole up-and-coming younger crowd that they know that they need to be, that they wanted as brand loyalists as well. But these are people who aren't necessarily going outdoors. They're people who are younger adults who are staying inside, where it may be more fun to experience something in a virtual world, whether online or through a game or whatever the case, as opposed to putting all the electronics down and going outside and being outdoors. How could the North Face do something that was over and above just delivering really fantastic jackets and gear to really engaging them at a whole new emotional level? So with that, we helped them create Planet Explorer. It's a new sub-brand that we helped create for them, a new concept for the North Face. And Planet Explorer is really about engaging people beyond just buying the gear. It's helping them not only buy the gear, which of course we want them to do, because that's what brands do, is you want to sell stuff, of course. But we wanted them to not only just buy it and just use it in a casual way, like commuting to work. We wanted them to use the gear. We wanted them to get outside and explore and really have people connect the dot between when I'm outside and I'm in nature, I have a really strong emotional connection. And I want to transfer that emotional connection with being out in nature with the North Face. So that's what the North Face was all about, or excuse me, Planet Explorer is all about. It's about creating ideas. So we created this whole portal to finding ways to get outside near you. This was done by partnering with hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit organizations such as Nature Find, as you see here, that already do this. I mean, there are so many wonderful programs all over the place where you can go on and you can go explore at the outdoor world. We just created a place for them all to come together underneath the North Face and Planet Explorer brand. So you can type in your local zip code, find what's going on, and jump in. So you can imagine in this case, what we've done is we've taken the wonderful North Face brand, but taken it one step further. And we've gone to do something that is completely a value-add situation, that this is all free. This is the North Face doing this because they want to create an emotional connection with their customers. So number 3, this is, I told you I was going to get to the budget. So this is firmly my belief on this, is that when companies are figuring out their annual budgets, and this comes into marketing, this is a marketing budget thing, but I think every marketing person on the planet can make an argument about why this should be an over and above their budget. But I believe that every company should be thinking about it. 15 to 20% of your marketing budget should be dedicated to brand loyalty. Now, I know that's probably a big, I'm sure people are probably looking at that thinking, ooh, holy cow, 15 to 20%, that seems like a massive number. But the reality of it is based on all these, the topics that we were talking about before and the value and the return you get on this, really, it's really the return that you can get from keeping loyal customers, making them loyal, turning them into evangelists, is much higher than any marketing return you could get on a brand new customer. So here's a tool that can help you kind of sort out exactly what are ways to create these customers. So if you are going to set aside maybe 15 to 20% of your budget, you kind of need to have a plan behind that to make the argument about, okay, we want to create brand loyalty, and I want to set aside 50%. That sounds a little loosey-goosey, doesn't it? So there has to be a way, you have to rationalize, there has to be a program behind what that might be. And here's a really great way, a really great tool for helping you understand, if we're going to do this and we want to create exceptional customers experiences, what might we do? So at every level, there's kind of 4 quadrants. There's 4 levels of basically what customers expect out of something or don't expect, as you'll see. So when a customer is first buying your brand, they have a required minimum set of what they require for your brand to do. So, you know, in the case of say you're selling software, for example, they may, when they buy your software, they expect it to function exactly like it's supposed to function without any bugs. You know, at its most basic minimum, I'm going to use your software, I'm going to use it every day, and I want it to be bug-free. I don't want it to crash. At the next level up from this is what are called, you know, expected gains. So these are, okay, beyond that minimum bug-free experience I expect from the software, I may expect something else because I bought your brand. You know, I'm buying your brand. I'm buying into your world. You weren't the cheapest, so what am I getting from that? What am I getting for paying a premium on this? And so maybe in this case, maybe an expected gain out of this would be maybe you offer customer service that every response happens in 12 hours, or every response happens in 24 hours guaranteed. So maybe that's an over and above the required thing that when they start seeing that, they're like, okay, that's an added value that I'm listening now. And that's something that I expect that now from you because I bought into your brand. This next level is called the desired level. And so the desired level is when it's not something they necessarily expect, but man, if they had a dream world, in their dream world, this would be something that would be over and above. So they don't expect you to deliver this. They don't expect your brand to deliver it. But, you know, in this dream world, wouldn't it be, you know, really great if it did? So, like, here's an example. Say that we're talking about software. So say in that software example, say the software is designed to help facilitate, you know, procedural coding or whatnot in a hospital. So in the dream world, in this desired state that your customer may have, maybe they would also have, okay, when I buy this software that facilitates coding, the brand that I'm buying is also offering monthly educational seminars for free as part of this. So all the people who are using the software and the coders and everybody I have in the hospital can stay up to date and learn about what the trends are. So maybe maybe that's not something they may feel like, wow, that would be a lot to ask for. But if you could offer something like that, now all of a sudden, again, you've really tapped into this desired component. The last quadrant on here is where really truly where the brand loyalty part comes into play. And this is really the gold card of everything we're talking about. And this is the unexpected. Kind of like the gentleman Zonder who unexpectedly just got that very simple thank you card. Kind of like in the North Face, how you went and bought a jacket and you unexpectedly, you didn't realize when you bought the jacket, you were going to buy an online portal tool to fantastic places in your own city that you or countryside that you can go use every weekend. This is really that unexpected part, and it's what takes it over and above what they already expect. So let's take this the software example again and continue on. What might be something in that software, just to give an example? And remember, the thing about the unexpected side is this is where the emotional component comes into play. So where the first parts are more functionally driven, to get into this fourth quadrant, it almost always has to have an emotional quality to tap into anything that's over and above. So one thing that I always like to remind everybody about in this process is, regardless if you're selling B2B, B2C, B to whatever, the person that you're selling to is exactly that. They're a person. First and foremost, all of us, the one thing we all have in common is that we're human. We're people. We have emotions. We have brains. We have all these things in common. And you see study after study that now has defined that we actually make more of our decisions on emotions than we do on logic. And there's actually a brand new study that just came out of Harvard that just published in the Harvard Business Review that reinforces that. In fact, that would be a great future topic for this. But say, for example, in this case, say you're that software company. What would be a way that you could tap into the emotions? So say, this may be just an absolutely silly example, but you'll get the idea. Say that one of your customers, that's buying your software, what if you, on completely out of the blue, completely unannounced, and completely unexpected by them, you threw a lunchtime party for them? It could be a big party in a box. So maybe in that box is food, maybe there's music in the box, maybe there's really fun games in the box, and it's all customized and it's sent directly to this department of your customer. Now you've created something that, one, your customer didn't expect. Two, it's just fun. And because something is fun, and because you're having them interact with your brand in a different kind of a way, in a more lively kind of way, it's something that is going to be recorded in their emotional brain. And as a result of that, it's something that is going to stick, and it's going to be part of that effective commitment over time, because chances are, if out of the blue, I know if anybody here, if out of the blue, if you got some unexpected gift like this out of the blue that involved the entire department using it, then chances are you're going to remember that, and it's going to plant a very positive memory. So that's just an example of what an unexpected component of this might be. So when you talk about setting aside your budget, you need to have some ideas about what you're going to do, and you have to build a rationale and the case behind spending that money as well, obviously. So let's kind of start wrapping this up here. So one point I wanted to make about this is that if your company, if you think back and you reflect about your company, and if your company isn't delivering the basics, meaning the functional benefits, then you have to start there. So in other words, I think you probably understand what I mean here. If your company isn't doing what it's saying it's going to do, you don't even have a shot at building brand loyalty. You have to start at delivering the basics to be able to get to that point. So, like I said, you have to do an honest assessment, and if your company is not delivering on the basics, then you have to start there. Then once you do that, then you can start thinking about brand loyalty. I know that's an obvious point, but you can't. There's no shortcutting here. It just doesn't work in this world. So, just kind of to conclude and wrap all this up, at the core of effective commitment is this idea of creating over and above experiences. These over and above experiences are what create these emotional responses that in turn into memory. And these ideas that turn into memory is what creates brand loyalty and gets people talking about you and has people coming back over and over again to you. So I'll just kind of leave you with this question. What are you doing for your customers that go beyond their expectations? What are you doing to surprise them? Or how can you surprise your customers in a really positive, fantastic way? how can you anticipate their needs even before they do? And how can you, personalize these experiences that you're having, like in a very personalized way, so you can tap into that emotion side of this at the end of the day that really makes them smile. I know that sounds a little corny, but that's really kind of what this gets down to, is how can you make your customers smile in a way that is unexpected? Because once you've actually done that, you're tapping into the right components, and you've taken a really good, solid leap into creating brand loyalty. So, thank you very much for joining us here on this today. I'm going to see if we have any questions on here. And let's see. I'm going to turn it over. Let's see. We do have some questions here. Great. All right. Here's a question. It says, this is from John. You mentioned the emotional component over logic of brand loyalty. Can you expand a bit on the role of people, employees, delivering these experiences as brand ambassadors, and how to align them with the goals of the marketing team? Is it just to treat them right, and they'll hopefully treat your customers right? That's a really good question. So basically, I think that question is getting to the heart of is how do we deliver? How do you get? Obviously, these experiences are delivered by the frontline people, the people who have face-to-face experiences with them, and that's so important that there is a solid alignment here in this idea of creating brand ambassadors. What has to happen in a situation like that is, one, this is a company-wide cultural thing, as I think you can imagine. The marketing group trying to think about delivering exceptional brand experiences on their own in a vacuum without the rest of the company, particularly the frontline people, supporting them, probably just isn't going to happen. It's going to happen in a not very clear way. So, creating brand ambassadors internally is really, really super important in that they have to, one, understand what are the objectives. Perhaps you have to incent them. And I think sometimes employees often respond. I think employees don't necessarily always respond to being incented financially. I think that certainly helps. I think employees often respond in very emotional ways and in interesting ways. But incenting employees to become brand ambassadors, whether it's financially or through other means, could be a really key component of this. But the bottom line is that everybody in the organization, one, needs to understand what the objective is, what's the brand about. And when we talk about creating exceptional brand experiences, what does that mean, and what are individual roles? So this is something that has to be very well thought out in great detail to make sure that it works properly. All right, let's take another question here. So another question: how do you measure brand loyalty? Oh, good question. Okay, so brand loyalty is, the nice thing about brand loyalty is that it's actually very measurable, because brand loyalty is often most directly tied to revenue. So most companies, even if when you're in a two-step process, meaning that you're in a two-step distribution through a distributor or whatnot, sometimes it can be a little tricky to understand who your end customer is. But say, for example, you have data and you understand what customers, what they're buying, how often are they buying. I mean, we live in a data-rich world now, so everybody should have access to this at some point. So if you know that a customer is repeating buying, if they're staying loyal, if you have a referral program set up of some sort and somebody's tapping into your referral program, those are all good measures. But at the end of the day, this is really about revenue. I mean, you're doing this because you want to increase your revenue. So it's a really great direct measure is how much you are selling to an individual company, an individual person, whatever the case may be, over time. So it's actually quite measurable. I have another question here about budget, about linking this to budget. Can you suggest ways to manage this as a component of the budget? I kind of expected a question like that to come up. So I think that kind of relates back to this first question here about the budget. Yeah, budgeting is always a tricky thing. And in the case of, in this case, if you're recommending a 15 to 20% component of your budget, like I mentioned before, you need to have a solid financial story on why that is the case.
So link it back to revenue. This should always be linked back to revenue. So if you can build a case internally about the return that you're going to get on this and why the return on building, on growing your share with an existing customer versus obtaining a new one, which is a pretty straightforward thing to do, then that's your case right there. The actual financial side of this is quite easy. I actually find this easier than justifying a marketing budget for customer acquisition, all new. Because that's a tricky one. That really, truly can be a tricky one because, let's be honest, there's a certain amount sometimes of guessing that is involved with that because of how long the sales cycle may be and all these outside influencers. This is actually a little bit more black and white because these are people who are already in your world. So the main thing is just build a financial case behind it to sell it. Another example, another question. We know that monetary value can be attributed to a brand. Trump is a perfect example. Yes, indeed. Does brand loyalty have intrinsic monetary value too? Yeah, absolutely. So brand loyalty, like we've just been talking about, it's interesting that all these questions are going to the financial side of this. Brand loyalty most definitely has an intrinsic monetary value to it. In fact, I think that's kind of the whole point of all of this. And I think that if you think about some of the most successful companies in the world, and I'm happy, I've gone 49 minutes and I have not mentioned the word Apple, but here it is. I'm going to mention the word Apple. I don't think there's any more, there's no more brand loyalty company in the world than people who buy Apple products. Are Apple products better than other products? Yeah, I mean, no, that's an argument. I don't know. In some cases, maybe they are. Some cases they aren't. Do they justify the price that we all spend on Apple products? Probably not. So the idea of what you're buying here is we're being loyal and we're spending money. We're spending money on the brand. I just saw this interesting statistic that 92%. This is from the Wall Street Journal last summer in July. 92% of all smartphone profit. So 92% of all global smartphone profits go to Apple. So let that digest a minute. 92% of all profits with smartphones go to Apple. Yet Apple only has a 20% global market share of smartphones. That is amazing. That means that they're raking in 92% of the global profit, but yet they only have a 20% market share. So the difference in that, one could argue, is definitely brand loyalty, and I think that's a perfect example of the monetary value that brand loyalty brings to a company. So one last question here. It sounds like you're saying that there's a strong tie between brand strategy and corporate culture, that they're necessary to create a strong brand experience. No? If so, how would you suggest doing that? So yeah, very good question. So yeah, there is absolutely a key connection between the culture of an organization and how you deliver this. I think the best way to go about doing that is, culture is a tricky thing. It's a very, very tricky thing. The first thing you have to do in any kind of a cultural move is you have to do an assessment of your culture to understand, if we want to create exceptional brand experiences, but yet we have a troubled culture internally, it's going to be a hard move to do that because you really depend on your culture doing that. So the first off you have to do is really do an assessment of your culture, and the only way you can do an assessment of your culture is to talk to the people, surveys, internal focus groups and whatnot. It's the only way you can really understand, one, what is our culture like, and two, what's the gaps we're going to have. If we want to create these exceptional customer experiences, what are the challenges we're going to have to do that? So again, you may want, the first work you have to do on this is working on your internal culture to make sure that you do have happy employees that are going to deliver happy experiences for their customers. It's kind of hard to imagine a company that had unhappy employees or disloyal employees going out and creating happy and loyal experiences for customers. It's too big of a leap, and so I think that it would just make sense that the first place you have to start is first understanding what the culture is, and then building a program around the culture that incents, as I mentioned earlier, and really delivers in a very clear and articulated way what these exceptional customer experiences are, what they're expecting, what the expectations are of the individuals, and how they go about doing that, and also giving them the power to do that. Oftentimes delivering exceptional experiences means that people need to be empowered to do that. So this is something, again, that many retail companies have figured out, but I think the rest of the world, the B2B world, all the rest of the businesses that are going on, I think everybody can learn sometimes what are some of the basics of retail and apply that to your world as well. So, all right, thank you very much. This has been a great session. I hope you have found this to be rewarding, and I hope you found it to be interesting. If you have any questions, my email address is on the screen now. It's mbowen@aloftgroup.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And also just keep a lookout for future Aloft sessions. We do these currently 4 times a year. And so the next one will be coming up. This was the winter edition, so we soon will be having the spring edition. So keep your eyes open for the next one. That will be coming up shortly. So thanks again for joining, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Oh, and also, yes, if you'd like to get a copy of this, more than happy to send you a copy of this presentation. Please just send me an email at mbowen@aloftgroup.com, and more than happy to send that out to you. And thank you, Bob, for asking that question. Happy to send that out, and anybody else who'd like that as well. All right, thanks very much, everyone.